Global tensions rise. Kim Jong-Un issues nuclear warning over Iran. Crisis, but this warning may not be about Iran alone. Behind the headlines, analysts see something far bigger unfolding, a quiet shift in global alliances, a nuclear signal aimed far beyond the Middle East, and if the warning is real, it could change the balance of power faster than anyone expected. But the real question is, who is this message actually meant for? For decades, the global political system has moved through cycles of tension and cooperation. After the end of the Cold War in the early 1990s, many analysts believed the world was entering a period of relative stability. Large ideological rivalries had faded, and global trade expanded rapidly. Countries began focusing more on economic growth, technology, and international partnerships. However, in recent years, this balance has slowly begun to change. Today, global politics is entering a more complex and uncertain phase. Competition between major powers is increasing again, regional conflicts are becoming more visible, and strategic alliances are starting to shift in ways that many experts did not expect just a decade ago. Within this evolving landscape, the Middle East remains one of the most sensitive geopolitical regions in the world. The region sits at the crossroads of 3 continents: Asia, Europe, and Africa. It also controls some of the most important energy routes and oil reserves on the planet. Because of this strategic position, events in the Middle East often carry global consequences. Even small political developments in the region can influence international markets, diplomatic relations, and security strategies. Iran plays a particularly important role within this environment. For many years, Iran has been one of the most influential political actors in the Middle East. The country maintains strong political, economic, and security connections across the region. Its policies affect the balance of power not only in the Gulf, but also in neighboring countries. Because of this influence, any change in Iran's leadership or security environment attracts immediate attention from governments and analysts around the world. Leadership stability, in particular, is seen as a key factor in maintaining political continuity. When the leadership of a major regional power faces uncertainty, the ripple effects can travel far beyond its borders. It is within this sensitive geopolitical moment that a new layer of tension has emerged. Reports began circulating about strong statements coming from North Korea's leadership. According to analysts, North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un signaled concern about threats against Iran's leadership and warned against any attempts that might target the country's political leadership structure. At first glance, such statements might appear unusual. North Korea and Iran exist in very different regions, separated by thousands of kilometers. Their immediate security concerns are not the same, and their regional environments operate under different political dynamics. Yet, when viewed through the lens of strategic deterrence, the connection begins to make more sense. North Korea's leadership has long been focused on one primary objective: regime survival. For decades, Pyongyang has built its national security strategy around preventing external intervention. The country's military doctrine emphasizes deterrence, sending clear signals that any attack against the leadership or the state would carry serious consequences. One concept that has shaped this thinking is the idea of a decapitation strike. In military terms, a decapitation strike refers to an operation designed to remove or eliminate the leadership of a country during conflict. The logic behind such strategies is that removing political leadership can disrupt command structures and weaken the ability of a state to respond. From Pyongyang's perspective, this idea has always been deeply concerning. North Korean leaders have repeatedly expressed fears that such strategies could be used against them during a crisis. As a result, they have structured their defense policies around ensuring that any potential adversary understands the risks of escalation. This is where nuclear deterrence becomes central. North Korea's nuclear program has often been interpreted as a tool designed not simply for military power, but for survival. By developing nuclear capabilities, the leadership believes it can create a powerful deterrent that discourages external actors from attempting regime-changing operations. Because of this mindset, events happening in other countries are often interpreted by North Korea through a similar strategic lens. When leadership threats appear elsewhere in the world, Pyongyang tends to view them as part of a broader pattern of geopolitical pressure. This helps explain why statements about Iran's leadership could carry meaning far beyond the Middle East. For analysts studying global security trends, such messages are rarely just about one country. Instead, they often function as signals, messages designed to communicate strategic intentions to multiple audiences at the same time. In this case, the message could be interpreted in several different ways. On one level, it may represent political support for a government facing international pressure. On another level, it could serve as a broader warning aimed at discouraging any actions that might resemble leadership targeting strategies. And at a deeper level, it may reflect something even more significant: the early signs of shifting geopolitical alignments. Throughout history, countries facing similar external pressures have sometimes found common ground with one another. Even when they are separated by geography, their strategic interests may overlap. North Korea and Iran, despite their differences, Both operate under complex international pressures. Both have faced economic sanctions. Both have experienced long periods of diplomatic tension with Western powers. These shared experiences can sometimes create opportunities for strategic communication or limited political alignment. Still, experts caution against jumping to conclusions. Rhetorical statements do not automatically translate into formal alliances or coordinated policies. Governments often use strong language to send signals without necessarily committing to direct action. Nevertheless, such signals are closely monitored by global analysts. Because in the world of geopolitics, words, especially those involving security and deterrence, can reveal deeper shifts that are still unfolding beneath the surface. And as tensions rise across multiple regions, many observers are beginning to ask an important question. Is this simply another moment of political rhetoric, or the early indication of a changing global power structure that could reshape international relations in the years ahead? To understand why North Korea would issue such a warning during a crisis involving Iran, analysts first look at one central question. How does North Korea think about security and survival? For Pyongyang, the answer has always been clear. North Korea believes that the world is unpredictable, and that only strong deterrence can protect a government from external pressure. This belief did not appear overnight. It developed slowly through decades of global events that shaped the leadership's view of international politics. North Korea's leadership studies global conflicts very carefully. They observe what happens to governments that face military pressure, economic sanctions, or foreign intervention. Over time, these observations have created a powerful lesson inside Pyongyang's strategic thinking. In the eyes of North Korean leadership, countries without strong deterrence often become vulnerable. One example frequently discussed by analysts is the case of Iraq. In 2003, the Iraqi government collapsed after a US-led military invasion. The country's leadership was removed, and the entire political system changed within a short period of time. Another example, often mentioned in strategic discussions, is Libya. In 2011, Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi, was overthrown during a violent conflict that followed international military intervention. What made this event particularly significant for North Korea was that Libya had previously agreed to dismantle its nuclear weapons program years earlier. For North Korean strategists, these events reinforced a clear conclusion. They believe that nuclear capability acts as the ultimate security guarantee. From this perspective, nuclear weapons are not simply tools of war. Instead, they function as a powerful deterrent, something that makes other countries think very carefully before attempting any form of military intervention. This logic explains why North Korea has continued investing heavily in its nuclear and missile programs despite international sanctions and diplomatic pressure. For Pyongyang, these programs represent survival, and survival is the foundation of all its strategic decisions. Over the past 2 decades, North Korea has steadily expanded its missile technology. Its weapon systems are now designed to reach targets at different ranges, from short-range missiles to long-range systems capable of traveling across continents. Each test, each development, and each announcement serves a specific purpose. It sends a message. The message is simple. Any attempt to threaten the leadership of North Korea will carry serious consequences. This is where the concept of decapitation strikes becomes important again. In military planning, a decapitation strike aims to remove a country's leadership during the early phase of a conflict. By targeting political and military leaders, the attacking side hopes to weaken the opponent's ability to respond. For North Korea, this idea has always been a major concern. The leadership has repeatedly warned that any attempt to target the country's command structure would be seen as a direct threat to national survival. Because of this fear, North Korea has built layers of deterrence into its strategy. Underground facilities, mobile missile launch systems, and highly secretive command structures are all part of this approach. These measures are designed to ensure that even if a crisis begins, the leadership can still maintain control and respond. But deterrence is not only about weapons. It is also about communication. North Korea often uses strong language in its official statements. These statements may appear aggressive or dramatic, but they often serve a calculated purpose. They signal strength, demonstrate resolve, and warn potential adversaries about the risks of escalation. This is why statements involving other countries can sometimes reveal deeper strategic thinking. When North Korea speaks about threats to leadership structures abroad, analysts often interpret the message as a reflection of Pyongyang's own concerns. In other words, when North Korea warns against leadership targeting operations anywhere in the world, it may also be reinforcing a warning about actions against itself. Seen from this perspective, the statement regarding Iran becomes easier to understand. Iran, like North Korea, has experienced years of economic sanctions and political pressure from the international community. Both countries have developed strategies designed to resist external influence and maintain political independence. While their political systems and regional roles are very different, they share one important similarity. Both governments place strong emphasis on deterrence and sovereignty. For this reason, when North Korea signals support for the stability of Iran's leadership, some analysts see it as more than simple diplomacy. It may represent a broader message about the importance of protecting leadership structures from external interference. Still, experts emphasize that rhetoric should not be confused with formal alliances. North Korea's statements do not automatically mean that the two countries are forming a direct military partnership. International politics often involves strong messaging that is designed to influence perception rather than announce concrete policy, but messaging itself can be powerful. In geopolitics, statements made during periods of tension often serve as early indicators of larger strategic patterns. They reveal how governments interpret global events, how they communicate their priorities, and how they attempt to shape the decisions of other countries. And in the case of North Korea, every statement is carefully watched by analysts around the world. Because behind each message lies a deeper question. Is Pyongyang simply reacting to events abroad, or quietly positioning itself within a changing global order, where alliances, deterrence, and power balances are beginning to shift once again? In global politics, not every country carries the same weight when it comes to regional stability. Some nations sit at the center of major political networks, economic routes, and security alliances. When something changes inside these countries, the consequences can ripple across entire regions. Iran is one of those countries. Located between Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Persian Gulf, Iran occupies one of the most strategically important geographic positions in the world. Major trade routes pass near its borders, energy shipping lanes move through nearby waters, and several regional conflicts intersect with its political interests. Because of this position, Iran's internal stability matters not only to its neighbors, but also to global powers that monitor developments in the region. For decades, Iran has played a major role in shaping political dynamics across the Middle East. Its policies influence security calculations in multiple countries, and its diplomatic decisions can affect the balance of power across the region. This influence makes leadership stability inside Iran extremely important. Iran's political system is structured differently from many other governments. Authority is divided among several institutions, but senior religious and political leaders hold significant influence over the country's direction. These leadership positions guide major decisions on foreign policy, security strategy, and regional partnerships. When leadership structures face uncertainty, analysts immediately begin studying the potential consequences. This is because leadership transitions, whether planned or unexpected, can create moments of strategic uncertainty. During these moments, governments around the world pay close attention, financial markets watch carefully, diplomats analyze signals, military planners evaluate possible changes in regional security. In the case of Iran, such attention becomes even more intense because of the country's role in several ongoing geopolitical rivalries. Iran's relationships with neighboring states, as well as its interactions with global powers, have often been defined by a combination of competition, diplomacy, and strategic caution. Over the past several decades, Iran has focused on strengthening its ability to resist external pressure. Economic sanctions, political disputes, and regional conflicts have pushed Iranian leaders to develop strategies that prioritize national independence and internal resilience. These strategies include building strong domestic institutions, strengthening regional relationships, and maintaining a defense posture designed to discourage external intervention. But deterrence in modern geopolitics is not only about military capability, it is also about perception. Countries often send signals to their rivals through diplomatic statements, political messaging, and strategic communication. These signals shape how other governments interpret intentions and calculate risks. This is why statements made during periods of tension can carry such importance. Even when they do not represent immediate policy changes, they can still influence how global actors interpret unfolding events. In the case of Iran, messages from outside actors, especially those connected to leadership security, can quickly become part of a larger geopolitical conversation. When North Korea signaled concern about threats to Iran's leadership, analysts began asking a broader question. Why would Pyongyang comment on leadership stability in a country thousands of kilometers away? Part of the answer lies in the interconnected nature of modern geopolitics. Countries facing similar external pressures sometimes develop informal strategic sympathy with one another. This does not necessarily mean they form direct alliances, but it can create shared narratives about sovereignty, security, and resistance to outside influence. Iran and North Korea operate in very different regional environments, but both countries have experienced long periods of international tension. Both have faced economic sanctions. Both have navigated complex diplomatic negotiations, and both have placed strong emphasis on protecting their political systems from external interference. Because of these similarities, statements referencing leadership protection can resonate across both political systems. But analysts caution that geopolitical messaging often serves multiple purposes at once. A statement directed toward one audience may simultaneously send signals to several others. When North Korea comments on Iran's leadership security, the message could be interpreted in different ways. It could be a symbolic expression of support. It could be a warning meant to discourage certain military strategies. or it could be part of a broader effort to highlight the risks of leadership targeting operations in international conflicts. Regardless of the interpretation, such messaging contributes to an environment where governments watch each other more closely. In global politics, uncertainty often spreads through perception rather than direct action. A single statement can change how policymakers interpret risks. Investors may begin analyzing potential market impacts. Diplomatic channels may become more active. Security agencies may reassess regional stability. This chain reaction illustrates an important reality of modern geopolitics. Events in one region rarely remain isolated. Instead, they connect to broader global patterns. And when those patterns involve leadership stability, nuclear deterrence, and shifting alliances, the stakes become even higher. For analysts observing the current situation, the key question is not simply what was said, but what it might signal about the future. Because sometimes the most important developments in international politics are not the events themselves, but the signals that suggest something larger may be forming beneath the surface of global power. In international politics, alliances do not always appear suddenly. Most of the time, they form slowly, almost quietly. They begin with small signals, shared concerns, similar political pressures, or parallel security strategies. At first, these connections may look informal. Governments may not sign treaties or announce partnerships. Instead, they exchange messages, statements, and diplomatic gestures. But over time, these signals can reveal something larger, a gradual shift in the global balance of power. For decades after the Cold War, the world operated under a system where most countries remained economically connected through global trade and international institutions. Even when disagreements occurred, many governments still worked within the same diplomatic frameworks. However, in recent years, that environment has begun to evolve. Economic sanctions, technological competition, and political rivalries have slowly pushed certain countries closer together, not necessarily by choice, but by circumstance. When governments face similar forms of pressure, they sometimes begin exploring cooperation with others in similar situations. This type of cooperation does not always look like traditional alliances. Instead of formal military agreements, countries may strengthen economic exchanges, share technological knowledge, or coordinate diplomatic messaging in international forums. Gradually, these connections can begin shaping a new geopolitical landscape. In the case of countries like North Korea and Iran, analysts observe a pattern that reflects this kind of strategic adaptation. Both countries have experienced years of economic restrictions and political disputes with powerful global actors. These pressures have forced them to develop alternative strategies for maintaining economic stability and political independence. One approach often used in such situations is diversification of partnerships. Countries under international pressure sometimes look for new trading partners, financial channels, and technological cooperation with other states that face similar challenges. These relationships can provide economic breathing room while reducing dependence on traditional global systems. While such cooperation does not necessarily represent a formal alliance, it can still influence regional power dynamics. For example, when countries coordinate diplomatic messaging or express political support for each other during moments of tension, it signals to the international community that they may share overlapping strategic interests. This is where statements about leadership security and deterrence become important. In the language of geopolitics, deterrence is not simply about military power. It is also about perception, how other countries interpret risk and calculate potential consequences. When leaders mention nuclear capability, strategic support, or leadership protection, analysts pay close attention. These signals can influence how governments assess escalation risks. Even rhetorical references to nuclear deterrence carry weight because they introduce the possibility, however distant, of conflicts extending beyond conventional military boundaries. For global security experts, this raises a fundamental concern. The world today contains several regions where tensions already exist: Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the Korean Peninsula, and parts of Asia Pacific. When strategic messaging begins connecting actors from different regions, analysts start examining whether separate conflicts might become politically linked. This does not mean that such connections automatically lead to coordinated military strategies, but it does suggest that global geopolitics may be entering a more interconnected phase. In such a phase, regional crises rarely remain isolated. Political signals in one region can influence diplomatic calculations somewhere else. Statements made in Asia can affect perceptions in the Middle East. Economic decisions in one continent can reshape alliances on another. For business leaders, policymakers, and global investors, this interconnected environment creates a new level of uncertainty. Markets react quickly to geopolitical signals. Energy prices fluctuate when tensions rise in major producing regions. International trade routes can become vulnerable if political conflicts expand. Investment strategies may shift as companies evaluate risks in different parts of the world. This is why geopolitical messaging, especially involving nuclear deterrence, receives such careful attention from analysts and decision makers, not because every statement leads to immediate action, but because these statements sometimes reveal the early stages of larger structural changes, changes that develop slowly at first, then gradually reshape the international system. Some experts describe this process as strategic polarization, a situation where countries slowly cluster into different geopolitical groupings based on shared interests, security concerns, or economic pressures. Such polarization does not necessarily recreate the exact structure of the Cold War. The modern world is far more interconnected economically and technologically than it was decades ago. But the emergence of competing strategic networks can still influence how governments make decisions about trade, security, and diplomacy. And when nuclear-armed states become part of these evolving networks, the global stakes increase even further. For now, analysts emphasize caution. Political rhetoric does not always translate into lasting alliances. Governments often use strong language during periods of tension to reinforce deterrence without committing to direct cooperation. Still, observers continue to monitor these developments closely, because sometimes the most important changes in global politics do not begin with dramatic announcements or formal agreements. They begin with subtle signals, a warning, a statement, a carefully chosen message delivered during a moment of international uncertainty. And when those signals start appearing across multiple regions at the same time, they may indicate that the world is slowly entering a new phase of geopolitical competition, one where alliances, deterrence strategies, and global power balances are once again being quietly redefined.